Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we are unpacking an absolutely incredible, seriously underrated anti-imperialist masterpiece, John Milius's forgotten 1989 film, Farewell to the King. I'm going to be guiding us through the wild, larger-than-life narrative beats of this epic story.
And I'll be right here alongside you, decoding the deep philosophical currents running right beneath the surface of all that action. This is a film that takes your standard Hollywood tropes and just completely shatters them. Seriously, by the time we finish this analysis, you are going to want to track down this movie immediately.
Oh, for sure. Let's dive right in. So, to really understand this film, we've got to start with the core question that basically acts as the pulsing, beating heart of the whole story. Can anyone truly escape the machinery of global history? It sets up this massive central philosophical struggle we are about to witness. I mean, is it actually possible to find a sanctuary, just some quiet corner of the world, and literally shut the door when the rest of the globe is tearing itself apart?
Right. And you really want to keep that question in the back of your mind as we unpack this, because the movie's answer is beautiful, but man, it is utterly devastating.
All right, let's set the stage. Act I, the descent and rebirth. We are dropping right into the bleakest days of 1942 out in the Pacific Theater. Our main guy is an American Army private named Leroy. So, after surviving this horrific shipwreck, he washes ashore on the coast of Japanese-occupied Borneo and is immediately captured. He's forced to watch his fellow Allied survivors get executed by a firing squad, but he manages to break away, fleeing deep into the hostile interior of the Borneo rainforest. It is a brutal, brutal descent. He's eventually discovered completely delirious, starving, and just eaten up by malaria by the Dayaks, an indigenous tribe historically known for headhunting.
And see, by all conventional logic, this is exactly where Leroy's story should end. But there's this absolutely crucial shift here. The Dayaks don't look at this giant blue-eyed raving stranger as a threat that needs to be eliminated. They actually view his sudden, miraculous appearance out of the unforgiving jungle as a profound omen. He isn't an invader to them. He is something entirely different.
Which leads us into this stunning 3-year transformation. I mean, Leroy completely sheds his American identity. He masters their language, their customs, all their ancient survival techniques. Then he actually uses his unique outsider perspective to negotiate peace between these violently warring tribal factions, effectively unifying the whole region. Ultimately, he marries a tribal woman, gets adopted by the people, and by earning their profound respect, he becomes the chosen, legitimate king of the Dayaks.
It's a total rebirth. He doesn't conquer these people at all. He is completely absorbed by them.
What he's essentially built out here is a hidden Shangri-La. It's this isolated paradise completely untouched by the massive global war raging outside. And it's super important to realize that Leroy actively rejects the imposition of Western ideals to make this happen. He's not trying to build a mini America in the jungle. He is finding peace by really leaning into the ancient rhythms of the Dayak people. For 3 whole years, it genuinely seems like he hit the nail on the head with our opening question. Like, yes, maybe you actually can escape global history if you just hide deep enough.
But as you might expect, that isolation just can't last forever. Which brings us to Act 2, the intrusion of history.
So the year is now 1945, and the outside world is inevitably pushing its way back in. The British Special Operations Executive is launching ops behind enemy lines. We meet Captain Fairborn, who's this very intellectual British officer, and his radio operator, Sergeant Tenga. They parachute into the deep Borneo interior to organize a resistance force. And imagine their shock when they find a highly organized, unified society ruled by a white American deserter just sitting calmly on a bamboo throne. This sparks a fierce, fierce ideological clash. Fairborn represents history, duty, and the harsh reality of global conflict. His view is basically, nobody gets to sit out a world war.
Right, exactly. And on the other side of that coin, you've got Leroy, who represents sovereignty, sanctuary, and just radical neutrality. Leroy literally looks Fairborn in the eye and basically says, look, the Allies don't care about my people. You just want cannon fodder. He flat out refuses to let the Dayaks bleed for a white man's war. It is such a phenomenal, tense standoff of worldviews.
And this standoff perfectly highlights what we call the illusion of escapism. The filmmaker John Milius, he doesn't let this paradise survive in a bubble, because global history inevitably demands blood.
Right, and that tragic turning point happens violently. A Japanese patrol ends up tracking the British radio signals right back to the hidden village. Suddenly, out of nowhere, a Japanese fighter plane screams out of the sky, strafing the settlement, destroying homes, and murdering tribal members. Literally, the very people Lee Croyd loves. It is a brutal, truly heart-wrenching scene that violently shatters their neutrality. History has officially forced its way in.
Which leaves our king with absolutely no choice. Act 3, Guerrilla War and Betrayal. With his paradise completely shattered, Leroyd is forced to cut a really desperate deal with Fairborn. He agrees to lead his Dayak warriors to fight the Japanese, but only, and this is key, only if the British officially guarantee the post-war independence of his kingdom. Armed with modern British automatic weapons, Leroyd's forces start combining their ancient silent jungle stealth with this devastating modern firepower. And they just systematically decimate the retreating Japanese units. But here's the catch. To protect his peace, he basically has to become a brutal warlord himself. And this creates an absolutely incredible thematic parallel between Leroy and his primary antagonist, Colonel Minamora. You see, Minamora isn't just some cartoon villain. He is a proud, highly traditional Japanese samurai commander. Both of these guys are fierce, incredibly capable leaders caught in this tragic mirror of one another. They're both just cogs in the massive machinery of industrialized warfare. And spoiler alert, both are ultimately discarded by the massive empires they once served. They're totally trapped in a war they can no longer control.
And that discard happens ruthlessly when British Colonel Ferguson arrives on the scene. As the Japanese forces break, Ferguson shows up, and he perfectly represents the cold, just completely unfeeling reality of post-war geopolitics.
He walks into the jungle, takes one look at the sovereignty deal Fairborn made with Leroyd, and essentially throws it straight in the trash.
Yeah, because to Ferguson, Leroyd isn't a king. Not at all. He's a dangerous renegade, a criminal deserter. And the Dayaks? Ferguson doesn't see an independent nation worthy of respect. He just sees colonial subjects who need to be forcibly reintegrated into the British Empire. It is just a devastating betrayal of literally everything they fought for. And this brings us right to the harrowing finale of the film, Act 4, Deconstructing the White Savior.
So Leroyd fully realizes the Allies have completely betrayed him. But before he can even deal with the British, Mitamara's remaining, desperate Japanese forces launch one final assault. Leroyd and Mitamara finally face off. But instead of some glorious slow-motion Hollywood slaughter, something incredible actually happens. These two battered commanders just look at each other and reach this grim mutual understanding of their shared tragic fates. The fight just literally drains right out of them. But of course, almost immediately after, the British military moves in to place Leroyd under arrest. And this climax right here brilliantly dismantles traditional Hollywood white savior tropes. I mean, usually the white guy shows up to teach the indigenous people how to be civilized. Farewell to the King flips that entirely on its head. Leroyd had to completely unlearn Western civilization just to find his basic humanity. The Dayak society was functioning perfectly fine on its own. The violence, the corruption, the ruin, it all comes entirely from the outside. The Western and Japanese empires basically act like these destructive viruses invading a perfectly healthy body.
So, how does it all end? Well, Captain Fairborn, who is just vibrating with guilt at this point for bringing the virus of modern warfare into Leroyd's paradise, makes a definitive choice. He actually helps Leroyd escape from British custody, letting him vanish back into the deepest, totally uncharted sectors of the jungle. As the film tells us, he fades completely out of modern historical records and back into the realm of folklore, the king who chose freedom over civilization. The empire simply cannot contain him.
Which ultimately leaves us with one seriously haunting question. What is the true cost of civilization when history comes knocking? Farewell to the King argues that the cost is so often our humanity, our peace, and our autonomy. It's a film that really demands we look closely at what we call progress and exactly who gets crushed under its wheels. We highly, highly encourage you to actively seek out and watch this forgotten gem so you can experience these themes for yourself.
It truly is a stunning piece of cinema. Thanks so much for joining us for this explainer, and we will catch you next time.